terrain is hilly and mountainous with steep slopes. With the rapid growth of population, there's a severe shortage of flat land, which is used for the construction of residential buildings, and also expanding the transportation network to alleviate traffic congestion. Therefore, reclamation is sometimes regarded as inevitable to support the continuous development of Hong Kong. And in fact, it is estimated that over 35% of our developed land was reclaimed from the sea. So, is that true? What is reclamation? And how does it affect our living environment? Let's take a deep look into it. So, we are now at the Bonham Strand. Could you imagine that this prosperous area was actually the coastal line of Hong Kong in the 1850s? In fact, this place was where the first reclamation project has ever occurred locally.
The first official reclamation took place in 1851, aimed to settle down the rubbles of a huge fire broke out at Queen's Road Central as well as increasing land supply. During 1900 to 1950, coastal line of Wan Chai, Kwun Tong, Kowloon Bay and the Kai Tak Airport has been extended by reclamation. During that time, reclamation was completed with full dredging. Marine deposits are removed and replaced by sand from mountains and outer sea. These lands perform different functions. The Chap Lap Kok Airport for transportation, Disneyland for recreational and Cheung Wai Yin for residential purposes.
Reclamation has been proposed for over 100 years, and techniques have been evolving. In the previous part, we've introduced some traditional methods that are used in the past. But how about current practices?
In recent decades, the Environmental Impact Assessment Ordinance was enforced. Resources were also found insufficient to store contaminated sediments and bring new sand. People started to pay increasing attention on sustainable reclamation. In current practices, vertical drains are adopted, which lay sand on existing marine deposits to squeeze water out and compress their texture. The mixture can then withstand further constructions. Dredging is then limited to the seawall section but not the main reclaimed area. This method is cheap and simple, but not suitable for contaminated areas as the water squeezed out might harm marine ecology.
So now we have a basic idea on the present practices of Hong Kong's reclamation projects. But how does it affect us? Let's see in social and environmental perspectives.
In fact, we received some general opinions from public stakeholders upon reclamation.
I think expansion is sometimes good, but I think it takes away from the actual uniqueness of Hong Kong.
填海同埋當然填海破壞生態。
運，因為如果太窄對航運嚟講又冇乜好處嘅，咁所以其實我覺得係你填咗海之後，你只係多塊地方用，但係對於海運同埋個海水個流通，其實冇任何好處嘅，即係我自己覺得嚇。
Regarding social impacts, government representatives gave the following comments.
嘅工程係少嘅，咁所以喺工地好細，但係又容納咁多工人、咁多工程情況之下咧，就會引申你個問題就不停咁會改道啦，亦都會有個重因問題就滋擾到啲旅客。啲商場都有啲怨言嘅，啲工人出入好多啊，對佢哋本身嘅租客啊或者係用家都有啲滋擾咁樣。
From the interviews, you could observe how reclamation has brought disturbances to communities and social operations. How about environmental impacts? There were significant adverse environmental impacts in different stages of reclamation. Dredging, disposing marine deposits, and seabed refilling would lead to problems like marine pollution, habitat degradation, and hindrance to photosynthesis of marine plants.
Okay. 第二問題未到3字，啲泥咧去邊度？走出去公海度抌落去。啲沙喺邊度嚟㗎？海沙填海最好用嘅，咪周圍喺海度吸咯。咁你吸呢啲沙，你對於海底嘅影響點？係咪好大嘅破壞？
To neutralize the negative impacts of land reclamation, some measures have been taken to mitigate the environmental and noise problems.
We visited CEDD to practically understand what has been applied as alleviative measures. Suggested by CEDD, filter nets are added to prevent sediments and polluted water to contaminate the sea. Silencers are used to block noise. Protection areas were also set up as a temporary haven to protect species like dolphins. After the construction is finished, an eco-sauna is built to increase biodiversity, but the effectiveness has been unknown.
根據你嘅經驗，
我覺得係可以改善嘅。譬如話佢依家話做一個海豚保護區咁做補償，但係其實佢哋係話做完個工程先至做嘅。咁其實做個工程開始已經有破壞啦。咁點解唔可以個工程甚至未開始之前已經喺可以做嗰啲空間嘅地方已經做定個保護區
？But then here is the critical point. If reclamation is not justified at first place, why is it necessary for us to harm the environment first and then mitigate? So the next thing we're going to focus on will be whether the purpose of reclamation is rightful and if it is necessary.
When the government considers town planning upon reclamation, they should in fact examine sustainability principles besides economic growth. Considering environmental components, there should not be severe harm on endangered species and valuable ecologies.
我哋攞個平衡啦，要發展嘅同時，我哋亦都要平衡到生物、海洋生物或者生態嗰個發展啦。
For social perspectives, end use of reclaimed land should primarily bring public interests to trivial Hong Kong citizens, as these fields are local public properties.
海 by law 係 public asset 啊嘛，你填出嚟嗰啲地，就算你愛嚟起路，你都一定要 public use。啲地發展出嚟，仍然要 public enjoyment。
其實最重要咧就係話你個發展係咪 well justified， 即係你呢個發展係咪真係需要先嚇？如果你個發展唔係咁需要嘅時候，咁我哋冇理由要付呢個環境代價。
Under our legal framework, reclamation projects have been regulated strictly by purpose. Let's take the Victoria Harbour as an example.
Presumption against reclamation harbour 就係有個法律上嘅推進係唔準填海，除非你證明到你填海個目標係重要過保存個海，如果唔係唔準填。咁呢個叫一個 overriding public need。
When environmental impacts are under control, reclamation for the construction of public recreational areas and expansion of transportation networks might then be appropriate.
填埋中環同灣仔、銅鑼灣，呢個做一個叫中環灣仔繞道之後唔會再填嘅。OK， 呢條路需要嘅，我哋支持嘅，因為要舒緩交通。
However, a lot of plans proposed did not aim this way. Reclamations for commercial skyscrapers and business facilities have overrated economic factors over environmental and social needs, and therefore violating sustainable development principles.
因為過往大家覺得好似啲海濱嘅發展就好似商業嗰個元素非常之高，就係和旅客根本上市民，我哋香港嘅市民普羅大眾都享用唔到。即係例子你講，即係譬如尖沙咀嘅海中心做出嘅海濱長廊，同樣嘅。
Even if there's a justified purpose, reclamation might not be necessary. In fact, there are lots of better alternatives to increase land supply for business development and residential housing.
填開出嚟啲地好少嘅啫，你全個而家剩翻3000公頃，你填晒咧都得3000公頃嘅地，淨係咁填有3000公頃啦。新界而家西邊咧，你發展咧，咩都喺晒度。西鐵啦、3號幹線啦，嗰度啲地係平嘅，唔使填，又唔使掘沙，咁只係要政府肯改變嗰個策略。
Other examples include further utilization of short residential flats.
將舊嘅城區，譬如你土瓜灣好多低層個樓宇物業咧，其實可以拆咗佢，可以去重建，去起翻你相對嚟講起翻40或者係50層高個樓宇嘅話，咁你咪可以容納到個人個比例咯。咁係唔需要填海。當你
These spacious areas are geographically flexible and much more ideal for urban development given that transportation networks have been continuously reformed. As a result, reclamation might not be always suitable in the case of Hong Kong. But then, the alternatives are not always ideal in reality. Land collection in the new territories have been complicated under legal and social considerations.
新界都有平地，咁但係嗰啲好多私人地。如果去收啲私人地去做發展咧，嗰個程序同埋嗰個價嗰個錢咧要好多。收地喺新界你錦田元朗好多平地你收咧，可能搞你10幾20年你都收唔到，因為好多業權嘅鬥爭。
In other cases, concerns are neglected and reclamation still goes on under powerful authorities or supreme forces.
通過咗條法律，佢哋完全唔理條法律，照填海入。
But everybody wants to be in the center where the money is and where the property value is. I've never actually seen a reclamation project actually cease. Right? Once it goes through, and it's going to go through because if a guy with big money wants to have it happen, he's going to pay to have it happen.
The third runway is a concrete example, which is doubted by the majority on its necessity and disastrous environmental impacts while still possibly goes on.
In these cases, we should at least fight for more environmental friendly ways of reclamation, such as cover dam seawalls or deep cement mixing.
With new methods, low dredging of marine deposits are required as original cement are strengthened to withstand further construction. Much less disturbance and burdens will then be brought to our marine ecology, and land required to store dredged sediments could be largely reduced. At least, efforts have been made to guarantee safety of marine species like dolphins. However, these methods are much more expensive.
科技咁錢唔係主要我哋政府嘅一個最大嘅考慮。我諗係除咗錢之外，我哋都要平衡公眾嗰個利益。因為
咧就要睇嗰個地方啦，佢講緊舒緩緊乜嘢，佢個目的係乜嘢？譬如話，我哋目的係保護海豚嘅，咁我覺得貴啲嘅啫。
作為納稅人咧，我自己覺得用得適當其所啦。
I mean, the money's there. You put the money up front and you do it properly and you do it right and you don't cause a lot of harm. I think that's always the best way to go.
Although these measures cost much more resources and capital, they are last resource to safeguard environmental and social interests. Once technologies maturize to limit uncertainties, they can act as ultimate solutions compromised with environmental factors. If we consider ecological costs, such as drastic decrease in dolphin populations and sustainable development of Hong Kong's harbour, these costs might seem economical in the long run.
Therefore, it is well suggested that reclamation might not be an optimal solution in most cases, as there are alternatives to increase land supply that create less environmental impacts and maybe cost less. Not as ideal in reality though, we have to balance interests of all stakeholders to get a common ground for implementation of social policies. And when reclamation has to go on under pressure from uncontrollable or supreme forces, we should fight for more environmental friendly options as a compromise. This is what we can practically do to ensure sustainable development during town planning.